And we are back, everybody, with the Joey B podcast. We have a very, very special guest today I'm super excited about. I've been looking to have this conversation, I think for me personally. In 2020, I started looking for a rabbi to talk to and interview, and I asked around a couple different people. Nothing really kind of panned out, and then, luckily for me, our mutual friend put us in contact. And so, everybody, I'm super excited to bring on Rabbi Yossi. Thank you for coming to OPT and being willing to talk with me and Serene. So thank you very much. And I'm super excited. So before we get into the heavier stuff, can you kind of fill us in on how you become a rabbi, like your kind of life path, and what made you decide to become a rabbi?
It really starts from a very young age, where you go to a private school, religious school, and from the very beginning you're studying texts that will assist you in being able to understand Jewish law, appreciate the spirit of the law, and of course learn how to inspire ourselves and motivate ourselves, as well as motivate others to follow in those laws and live a good life. As we get older, we study more and more complex texts, and at the very end of our studies, usually in our early 20s, we are studying particular laws that are complex enough to convince those that are testing us on this material that we're ready to tackle, difficult questions that will come our way and difficult situations that will come our way, and then we are ordained as rabbis.
So at a young age, you knew you wanted to be a rabbi? Like, you were like, this is my path?
Yes, the people in our community typically believe that it's important to do so before one gets married and ventures out to the outside, secular world outside of the insular religious community. We want to sort of create for ourselves a title, because then we end up respecting that title ourselves. We know we have to live a certain way, and the people are watching us. And then we're able to be in a better position to help others. If we become a pulpit rabbi, that's one option. Many of my friends become professional lawyers, doctors, and accountants, and many of my friends work on Wall Street, and they're rabbis. My father just became a rabbi at age 72. Oh, wow. He just decided, he retired from Wall Street after working there for decades. He's a rabbi now, because it was important for him he always wanted to, and he just got around to it now. But it's not so much you become ordained to be a rabbi so that you can speak from the pulpit. It's a certain acceptance upon yourself that you're dedicated so much to the law that you're ready to now help others, guide others, and live a certain way of life.
What age did you become rabbi?
I was 22.
Oh my God.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh dang. Wow. So you were like on the fast track.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay, wow. Now, do you have brothers, sisters? You have brothers and sisters that are they, your brothers or rabbis or family? Like,
both my older brother and my younger brother are rabbis. The older brother is a rabbi in Thousand Oaks, so he has a congregation. He runs what's called a Chabad House, which is an outreach organization. So it serves the people of his community, even those that don't necessarily come to synagogue or consider themselves religious. He reaches out to them and brings the synagogue experience to their homes, or to the programming that they do in malls when they light menorahs and things of that nature. My younger brother got a real job, unlike my brother and I, who became rabbis. He's a rabbi ordained, but he went to work in some pretty big firms, and he's extremely successful at what he does. He's in IT security.
Okay.
So and my youngest, and after us three boys, my sister is a nurse in New York, and my youngest sister lives in South Africa, and she's a nutritionist.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, do you so you grew up in New York?
Crown Heights, Brooklyn.
Okay. When did you come to AZ?
2007.
Okay.
January 1st.
What was the decision behind that?
Typically the questions we ask ourselves after we get married, and usually after we had a kid and we're sort of settled down for ourselves, and we ask ourselves where we most needed, where might I be able to be helpful and at that point I really wanted to just teach people in a class setting, like adult education. And Scottsdale, Arizona was a place at that time that was one of quite a few places that were looking for rabbis to just come in and be in charge of the adult education programming, which is what I did, and that's what I came here for.
Are people shocked, like how young you are when you became a rabbi? Is that when you show up, like they're like, oh, whoa, you're so young? Like, does that happen a lot, or is it common to be a rabbi so young?
It's common in my circles.
Okay.
So people appreciate, especially when they realize that I'm not the kind of rabbi that they imagined. In other words, the kind of rabbi that they may have grown up with, believing that there's a rabbi with a long white beard who's like difficult to approach. So once they see that I'm approachable, it makes more sense that I'd be a younger guy who's not taking myself too seriously, mm-hmm. and therefore able to befriend them and not be on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm. What does the word? Oh, you could just tap. There you go. Does the word rabbi have a meaning? Does it mean something?
Absolutely.
Like, are you allowed to share?
Of course. Okay. Of course. Usually the name of a Hebrew name of something tells you a lot about that which you're trying to describe. But rabbi really means teacher.
Oh, cool.
And it doesn't mean leader. It doesn't mean master necessarily. It has a connotation of master, but master in a teacher sense. In other words, I know material and that you may not know, and so therefore I'm going to share it with you. There's no such thing in Judaism as let's relegate the religiosity to the rabbi, and I'll just hang on to his coattails. Other religions do say, hey, I'm the leader of this congregation. Connect to me. You don't have to know everything. Just connect to me. I'll be connected to a higher source because I'm knowledgeable. I went to a lot of studies, years of studying for this. You don't necessarily have to know everything. Just listen to what I have to tell you, and I'll let some information trickle down to you. A rabbi is constantly encouraging his congregants to become rabbis, to become teachers themselves.
So they're like the students.
They're like the students. So the word rabbi means, it's not a title like doctor, mm-hmm. and it's not meant to, it became that way in America perhaps, and maybe before, maybe in back in the European days, but it never was meant to be, you need to honor me because I'm big. You need to honor the Torah that I have, that I'm about to give you eventually over time. I'll give you everything. I want you to study everything. And I want you to be a master of the Torah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I didn't know that.
So it's like an encouragement for each person to become, like, you're all equal. It's like, study this so that you are also a master the way that I've studied this and mastered it.
That's correct. Okay. So I'm teaching you how you can connect directly to God, not through me, not through not to some other book or dogma. I want you to have a direct connection, a direct flight to God without any stopovers, and therefore you have full access to every book that I've read, and whether you get ordained or not, that's your choice. I needed to get ordained so that you are even interested in talking to me about it. But I want you to study everything that I've studied, and I want you to have direct access. I don't have more access than you do.
Wow, that's beautiful.
That's really beautiful.
That's very similar to Native American tradition. And just to fill everyone on this backstory, is that, I find a lot of similarities in the Judaic faith with Native American traditions. Obviously, we practice different things and study different things. But so, for example, we'll just take Sweat Lodge. We want people to experience Sweat Lodge because the prayers between you and Creator. I'm not here to facilitate that for you. I might have wisdom or knowledge, but you can also do these things to have that connection too. Or read this book. It's not forbidden. It's not. Now there's a tempo and a timing, because I'm sure part of you being a teacher is to discern when the student is ready for the next lesson. So it's the same thing, in Native American tradition, even at a young age, when a female has her first moon cycle, is what they call it. There's a ceremony for that. For a young man, there's a ceremony for that. There's ceremonies around marriage, around death. But it's in due time as you continue to grow and move forward. But we're not trying to get in the way between you and your prayer, you and your connection. And so I didn't know that. I think that's just like really powerful. What the yarmulke what does that represent? What does that mean?
As I mentioned
if you're allowed to.
previously, I have a cheat sheet, and you ask me a question, I know the answer because I just think about the name of the item you're asking about, and the name in the Holy Tongue in Hebrew, which in this case is yarmulka. Yarmulka is the correct way to. We say yarmulka quickly, but yarmulka comes from two Aramaic words, Hebrew words, Yerei Malka, fear of the king, which means being in awe of being in the presence of the king. Typically, when we're in the presence of our parents or some guru or mentor, we're very well behaved because we know we're in the presence of greatness. When a Jew walks around, they want to have a constant reminder that you are actually in the presence of greatness wherever you're going. Anywhere in the world, God is there and present, and so therefore act accordingly. So the yarmulke is meant to be it's a cloth, and it's just covering the head so that I know I have something above me, and it's not just that cloth. The cloth is just symbolic. God is above me and constantly watching me. It's like you're on camera all the time, and you actually are. Everyone actually is. We just believe that there's someone who's watching that camera, who is the camera. That's God Almighty.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It made me think about that was one of the Hebrew words that I sent you. Fear. You're going to have these different conversations, and they don't understand that fear. It means in the Hebrew translation, it's like awe, presence, like. But in modern times. And I'm only, just preference, I'm speaking for myself, Rabbi Yossi speaking for Rabbi Yossi. You're not speaking for the entire Judaic faith. So I want everyone to understand that he's not speaking for the entire Judaic faith. He's speaking from his experience, what he's learned, and I'm speaking from mine. So I'm saying for me, when I talk to other beliefs, other religions, Christians, they have it's always fear-based. And so then when I get into these conversations, and I'd say, hey, you know what the Hebrew word fear means? Like what this means? It means awe, reverence. Like if you were at the beach and you saw a 50-foot wave, it's beautiful. It's magnificent. It takes your breath away. It's not coming after you. The wave isn't trying to hurt you. The wave isn't trying to submit you. It's just that's what the awe, the reverence. And when I found that out, it changed a lot of my understanding around. Again, I read different spiritual texts. So when I get into these conversations, and we talked about this before, no one can put Native American spirituality down, because that's what happened to us as Native people, is that we were never given a chance to share our teachings. We were never given a chance to share our spiritual beliefs. It was just wiped out. We were punished, raped, murdered, tortured, put into boarding schools, kidnapped from our homes, shipped all over the country. And it's like, we have these teachings too. We have this. But for whatever reason, you don't, there's no respect, there's no reverence, there is no understanding, because there's not even space for us to share. So you'd be like, oh yeah, you guys do make a good point. And actually, you guys are doing good things. Be on your way. We have no issues. And so I really like that you brought that up just naturally, of like there's the awe, the reverence of magnificence, or like when we go hiking or whatever, it's like you see a huge mountain. It's not terrifying, scary like that. It's just like, oh man, it makes me feel so tiny. That's like when I found that word, I was like, oh, that's such a better, not only translation, you can feel like, oh, that's what it means, and I don't need to be afraid, just more of like a respect.
It's like when, like in other religions, like in Christianity or Catholicism, they'll say, "Oh, be God-fearing," but that always connotates like you should be afraid of what God does. Like if you sin, or this is what the consequences are going to be if you don't follow the word of God. Versus when you put that context to it, it's more like you actually are just in awe of God, of how great He is, or how great that energy of God is. And that's what God-fearing is like you're in awe of it. It's magnificent, it's beautiful, it's supernatural, it's unknown, but it's there for you to know it. So I just think that's a really interesting perspective to take on it, that it's like it's an awe,
and it creates a reverence. Mm-hmm. It just is there when you understand that. So I was joking with some people. I said, this is probably going to be the only podcast I've never cussed on, because of respect. Like there's a reverence there, that it's like, oh yeah, I'm not going how I normally talk, because I have a rabbi here, because there's a respect, a reverence there. Not because I fear you. It's like, oh, there's a respect there, you know? It's the same thing when I go into teepee ceremony or lodges. It's like, okay, I'm a lot more reverent here. Not because I'm afraid of punishment, but because that's the respect that divinity deserves. And that's like the fear, but it's not like, you know, what you were saying. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Can you talk a little bit about like the lifestyle of a rabbi, like your day to day? I would love to know. I was joking with Serene. I said, Rabbi Yossi's coming. We got to get some kosher snacks. I'm like, but I don't know what I don't know what that means. Like, so can you explain kind of that the lifestyle, your day to day, what you eat, kind of, you know, help us with that?
Sure. I'll just start by saying that we are obviously doing what everyone else does on a whole, but where the differences are is when we wake up in the morning, we acknowledge immediately and show gratitude with a 15-word prayer that's basically says thank you for giving me my breath, and that I get to recognize that the fact that I'm waking up means you need me again here in this world, and that's a pretty good thought to start the day with. I'm needed here. He needs me again. After after everything I've done and maybe not done properly, he still thinks I'm a good candidate to be a member of his world. But then to move on to prayers, that's the very first thing is to acknowledge, before really any other interactions, is to go to study about who you're going to pray to. But then, that's the study of Hasidut, which means deep esoteric and mystical dimension of the Torah wisdom, and then to go to prayer and actually speak to God from the heart for a period of time, usually about an hour, and then that's usually followed with you have to take care of the soul, and you take care of the body. You eat something, you go to work, you do. Every rabbi has their line of work, either to serve the congregation directly or in an indirect way. And then there's 2 more prayers during the day. There's a lot of study sessions that need to be done on a daily basis, that need to be like a quota that needs to be studied every day. In the book of Psalms, a portion of the Psalms have to be read, a portion of the of different parts of Torah need to be studied, and then that's family life is huge, plays a huge role. It's our first mission. God gave me my wife and my kids so that I can take care of them first and foremost, so they'll take precedence over the smartphone, and hopefully, and we try our best to follow we're mission minded. That's all. We're just constantly asking ourselves, what am I supposed to be doing right now? That's really the question that we ask ourselves a lot, and just try to think of God most of the day, as much of the day as possible. I'd like to end the day knowing that I thought about what I'm supposed to be doing for Him, rather than what I felt the world owed me.
What? Okay, so you said something again with native. It's like that's when we wake up, or we pray to the east where the sun rises, and it's like we say Yate, and the translation people say, oh, it's like good morning, but it's deeper than that. It's like I'm saying hello to Creator. I'm introducing myself, and it's like from the heavens to the earth. Know me, and if you know me, then, and I'm listening, you can, and we make offerings, whether it's smudging or corn or food or water. We make offerings. We want to give thanks first. We want to say thank you first, and now we're able to listen, to receive. How can we use the day in accordance with creation, with Creator? And so I love that you said that, because that's the first thing when I wake up and, do my thing. I just always say thank you to the Creator for my life. That's the first thing that I say when I pray, is like, thank you for allowing me to be here today. And then I go with my prayers, or, all kinds of friends, family, and things like that. And so I really I love hearing that too. It makes me feel good to say that, you got this 15-line prayer, and, the breath, and that's really beautiful.
When you asked me what rabbis do, it reminded me what a colleague of mine once was asked by the students, Rabbi, can you tell us, this long beard that you have here, when you go to sleep, do you put it under the covers or above the covers? And guess what? The rabbi couldn't sleep that night because he never thought of like where he puts his beard. He just went to sleep every night. But when somebody asks you, so what does a rabbi do every day? And then suddenly now there's a certain awareness of like this guy, like I don't like he puts his beard on top. He wasn't comfortable. He puts it under the covers. He's not comfortable. He's like, I don't know what I. And he taught the next day. He taught everyone. He said sometimes it's better not to be so aware of self, to think so much about. He said he used it as a parable for like, you know, if you're always self-conscious and constantly thinking about yourself, it's a very depressing day. If you spent most of the day thinking of what yourself should be doing for others and for God and towards your objective and your mission, it's a good day. That's when sometimes it's better not to be so obsessed with parts of yourself or yourself. It could be depressing when you're constantly. There's a time for self-meditate. There's a time to think about yourself. You should set aside, just like people set aside therapy sessions, you know, once a week or whatever it may be. You can set aside every day before you go to sleep. You'll think about, you know, whether, you know, make a self-assessment. But in general, you're supposed to be functioning throughout the day and not constantly thinking about self. That would be something that maybe a rabbi would want to teach people about how to go about doing that in their particular situations when they're challenged with various.
It's probably why the world's so sideways, because it's become such a self-oriented process. But speaking of the beard, is that like how is that is part of becoming a rabbi? Is the facial hair?
The default mode is that
default mode. I love that.
Because a lot of people have found, you know, the permissibilities by saying that we're within the world, we have to be worldly, we have to interact in business, and we can't look so different from everyone else. So first of all, I think today it's pretty cool to have a beard, like the hipsters.
Yeah.
You don't stick out as a rabbi necessarily. Sometimes people confuse me with it's not so straightforward that if you're wearing a beard, it's because the religion forced you to have one. But getting to the crux of there's a law that says that you're not allowed to cut certain parts of your hair. You have to leave certain parts of your hair intact, and all goes back to the times of priests who wore their hair in a particular way, and these priests were idol worshippers, and it was part of their identity. The way we look in the outside world, the way we dress, has to reflect what's going on inside of us and who we're dedicated to. And God said, I don't want you to mimic those kinds of haircuts and hairstyles. And the beard was something that was considered very, very holy, because we are created in the image of God. You've heard that before. And it says that in Genesis. When it says about God creating man, created human beings in the image of himself. And therefore, every body part that we have, our soul is godly, but every body part that we have is in fact also corresponding to a part of God, some way God relates to us. And the beard represents God's compassion.
Oh, wow.
So the last thing we want to do is remove that. We want to be able to draw down God's compassion for ourselves, for our families, for the people that we interact with. So
wow,
that's super beautiful. In Mexican and Native American traditions, like the hair is really sacred as well, but like, you know, the hair, the top of our head. And so you know, in Native history, it's like when Christians and Catholicism came over, it's like they cut our hair because of that tradition that we had. And you know, like especially for women, it's like we braid our hair because it represents our lifeline and all of our emotions and experiences in carrying the family. In Mexican tradition, they'll tie it with with ribbon or knots, depending on the color. You know, it represents different things. The colors represent different things, but you know, it's like that's why we wear our hair in braids. And then, you know, they say when we go into ceremony, you know, you let your hair down because you're letting spirit and the experience and God come in to like bless you from the top that way. But you don't cut your hair unless you're in mourning. If someone passes away, that's when you would cut the hair. But it's like a grieving tradition. But that's super beautiful because it's like you the Judaic faith also have that, but it's with the beard. Do the women have? Do the women have something similar as far as their length of hair or covering their hair?
Ironically, it's more similar to what you said, Serene. It's amazing because a Jewish woman's hair, after she gets married, becomes extremely sacred. and becomes, and it has a lot of life force. And covering it is the way of consolidating that energy for the purposes of marriage and for the purposes of keeping it sacred for the woman herself. And traditionally women have used different ways to cover their hair, but it's quite interesting that today many women will cover their hair with a beautiful wig that looks stunning, and which simply means that the idea is not, the objective is not to make the woman less beautiful by covering her hair, but on the contrary, to the beauty is going to be based on she can look beautiful, she's supposed to look beautiful. It's important though to recognize the power. There's a power of life force in the hair, and the Kabbalah, the esoteric dimension of Torah, speaks about the very powerful life force that is found specifically in women's hair.
Wow.
Yeah. In Mexican tradition, so I've been studying a lot the rebozo. So the rebozo is a piece of fabric that is woven, and it's typically made of cotton, in the cotton, or with a cotton wheel in Mexico, and they use different add different colors and dyes depending on the type or the part of Mexico that it comes from. But it the way that I've been studying it is for the use of birth work, in doula work, or in parteria, which is midwifery work and traditional midwifery work. But the rebozo itself, it comes from many different parts, and as I've learned, it's actually not just central to Mexico. I think it actually came from other indigenous communities in Africa, but it's been traditionally used to cover the hair. So that was actually like our form in our culture to cover the sacredness of the hair. Is the woman would wear it on top of the head. It's a form of protection, to protect their hair, to keep it beautiful, curly or straight, to keep the braids kept, but it's also been used to around the shoulders. It's like they say it's like a hug from grandmother. You use it to keep yourself warm. You use it to wrap your stomach to keep the womb warm, because that's also another sacred part. So it had many uses, of covering in that way. So I just thought that was a really beautiful correlation between the two.
What I want to get back to the Kabbalah, because I put that on here big time, because that's how I first even started to, ask more questions, is I kept, running across in my studies and esoteric studies around the Kabbalah. That's what got me into, when I study a word or a meaning, I always go to the Hebrew word, the Greek word, the Aramaic word. I try to find a native word for it. When you study the Bible, or I guess could you break down, because you have the Torah, I don't know if it's the same as the Bible. I put on here the 3 books that I have kind of talked about. When you are on that path, how do the books work? Which ones do you study at a time? Obviously, you're advanced 22-year-old rabbi. How does it, is there the difference between the Torah and the Bible? Can you explain kind of some of the sacred books in the Judaic faith?
Sure. So we begin with the 5 books of Moses, which God wrote, had Moses write into a Torah scroll. God taught Moses all the 613 commandments that are contained in the 5 books of Moses, and he taught it to Joshua, and he who taught it to the next teacher, to the next teacher, to the next teacher, kept giving it over generation to generation. And together with the written word was an oral law. So there's Torah Shebichtav, which means the written Torah, and Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law, which means simply that if you have a written word that doesn't have commentary, meaning someone explaining and teaching it to you orally, you will likely not misunderstand what's written, and everyone will read it differently. Whereas if you have an oral tradition from teacher to student all the way down, and you mentioned Kabbalah simply means to receive the Torah from before. That was there before. That was, and it's not about, they go together very, very well. The written word is powerful because then everything's anchored and no one can say that there was a different message because it's written. Mm-hmm. It's black ink on parchment, and you can't you can't really mess around with it. The oral ensures that you're understanding it properly. You have the opportunity to ask the teacher, Moses, I don't understand what you mean when you say that this verse implies 2 different commandments that I'm supposed to keep. then Moses explains, no, it's actually one command. And then Joshua can do the same thing to his student, and so on and so forth. The 5 books of Moses. If you want to expand that out, there's the books of the prophets and the books of the writings, which make up about 24 books. So 5 plus 19, 24 books of the written word. After that, everything else is all going to be commentary, and all has to be anchored in those books. So everything that was written afterwards, there's the Mishnah and the Talmud. These were designed to be lengthy. These are lectures and very deep discussions that were written. They didn't have podcasts in those days, 1,500 years ago. So every single podcast is written inside this very lengthy encyclopedic type of work called the Talmud. And then you have the mystical dimension of Torah, which is the soul of the Torah, of God's wisdom, rather than just the laws and the guidance of how to keep those laws. There's the spirit of the law, the inspiration behind why we keep these laws, so to speak, and why and how they facilitate this connection to God when you keep those laws. So it's the 24 books, and then it used to be that the oral tradition was not written. It specifically was not meant to be written, because then you had no choice but to seek out a teacher who would not just teach you the words, but guide you with those words and inspire you with those words. Over many years, hundreds of years, there was a lot of persecution. They were concerned that the material would be lost. It was a lot to memorize, so they wrote it out in the Mishnah and the Talmud. And the Kabbalah was never written until relatively recently, 500 years ago. You had Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, you had the Baal Shem Tov, you had the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. They brought these teachings in a book called the Tanya. Rabbi Shneur Zalman wrote. That was about 300 years ago. His birthday and the Baal Shem Tov's birthday was just 2 days ago, so it was very significant. But that's it. That's what we have. We have the revealed parts of Torah, what we call the hidden dimension of Torah, and those are 2 branches. There's the oral law and the written law, 2 general branches. So
it's again another. The more I'm talking to you, the more I was like, man, I'm really glad that I was listening to just like my intuition, in terms of I wanted to talk to a rabbi, because in native tradition everything is oral. It's an oral tradition, and you learn through songs, and you learn through prayer, and you learn through these different rites of passages. It's an oral teaching. And when I get into these conversations with people, the Americas are relatively young especially North America, in terms of the rest of the world. It's like the rest of the world had, thousands of years head start. So we never had the opportunity to write anything down. We have, again, teachers and books that we have, but there's no one unifying book. There's no unifying that. There was no, when the Spaniards came over and Christopher Columbus and they destroyed everything. And we never even had the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? We should probably all get together and save some of this stuff for generations, just in case. And so that's beautiful that you have that oral tradition, because again, it's like in all indigenous communities around the world, there's always an oral tradition, through storytelling, through different ceremonies, through different prayers, through different songs, through art, because that's how you have to be there. You have to be present. You have to practice, to use a Taoist saying, chop wood, carry water. But I say, you don't just chop wood, carry water. You got to know why you're chopping wood and what you're going to use that water for. And so that's like the oral of the practice. And so then if your teacher's like, hey, maybe same thing in native and indigenous, one tiny little inflection, the whole word changes. So then your understanding changes. So then if you have a teacher, it's like they can help you with the pronunciations. They can help you with, because in my experiences, which is why I value language so much, words make up everything. It's the logos. It's that important. So when you study the roots and the words, your understanding changes. So your landscape of your world changes. The listening, your listening changes. And so I didn't know that a big part of it was oral tradition. And I told him I had this wrong. Does Abraham predate Moses?
Yes.
So from my understanding, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, Was Abraham the first person who started to write the Old Testament, or where's the timeline in that?
Abraham was the first one to recognize God and started to preach monotheism in his time, and he's considered the first Jew because that's how it works. At that time, anyone who just recognized monotheism, he did keep the Torah, but it wasn't formally granted or given to the world as a tool to fix the world and make the world a better place until much later in the time of Moses. Abraham was preceded by a great person called Noah, and Noah is the father of all humankind. And when I started telling you about the books, the 5 books of Moses, you're right. I'm starting a good 2,500 years into the time since the creation. But the real beginning of humanity started with Noah, who's 10 generations before Abraham, 10 long generations before Abraham. And Noah, who was the only survivor of the flood, together with his 3 sons and daughters-in-law and his wife, was told that he's going to have 7 rules that have to be given over to all of humankind. So in fact, there's no people on earth that don't have something to rally around. Even if you may not have a book and you may do things through storytelling, but there's an understanding and a belief that there's 7 laws that all of humankind need to follow and respect. And I'll mention them now because I think it's very important, is to believe in one God, one divine entity, and not to disrespect, not to blaspheme, not to disrespect that God. That was number 2. Number 3 is to respect life, not to kill, respect family life, not to commit adultery, respect people's property, not to steal. Number 6 would be not to rip a limb from an animal in an inhumane way, but rather to do it in a proper way. And the 7th is to establish courts of law and justice, and includes charity and lots of other good things that we need to do. That's all part of social justice, the idea of living in harmony with each other, no matter where we live, and letting live and let live, and not causing trying forced conversions and things of that nature, which would disrupt social justice. So
yeah, and those are the Noahide laws, or
Noahide, yeah.
Noahide laws.
Yeah.
Okay. And we talked about this on the phone briefly. It was like same thing in Native American tradition. We have our own flood story. We have a flood story in Mexico. They have a flood story. In South America, they got a flood story. And so that's really fascinating. I always had that curiosity, and like the origin story. So, for example, in Native Dene, from what my Uncle Daryl had taught us, so you guys have Cain and Abel's in the Old Testament.
Sure.
We have twin brothers in our tradition. One's an owl, one's a hawk. And one's a destroyer, one's a creator. But they work together because you need both to be able to discern what to destroy and what to create. And that would be synonymous with the Cain and the Abel story. Now, when you study the Torah, the Bible, the sacred text, are you studying in Hebrew? Are you studying in other languages? Like how does that work in terms of like your path to become a rabbi?
In religious Jewish school, they're teaching us in Hebrew, and they want us to know how to read from the original texts. Mm-hmm. But especially today, over these past couple of decades that I've been watching this evolve, the English, everything's in English now. Everything, all the text. I mean, as far as I could see, everything is in English. So there's so much, to even if my kids don't know Hebrew perfectly yet, they still have access, complete access, and everyone does. Mm-hmm. Everyone, whoever wants to study, is able to study now.
Mm-hmm. Do you read yourself in Hebrew, or like to polish? Like, how do you stay, sharp with it?
Well, I'm always praying in Hebrew.
Okay.
I'm studying in Hebrew. I read from the Torah, as I did this morning, in Hebrew. So yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue.
That's beautiful.
Regularly.
Can you talk about? I know we talked about it on the phone, like what you do in like terms of your work life.
Sure. It's very interesting. It's not typical rabbi's work, but I work in an organization called the Aleph Institute, and a lot of different departments within the organization. Primarily, their role is to be there for inmates and to advocate for them, mostly for their rehabilitation, to ensure that the prison environment, which by default is not really designed, even though it's called sometimes it's called Department of Corrections. There's not a lot of correcting going on. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's not. my grand the grand Rebbe that I grew up with always used to tell us to stop calling the hospital in Hebrew a Beit Cholim, a place of sick people. He said, call it a house of healing rather than a house of sick people.
Oh wow!
So to call the prison's Department of Corrections is a misnomer. It's the way it should be. It's supposed to be a place where people get correct. So my organization helps people correct their lives, correct their the trajectory of their lives, so that they are ready to come back into society and be a upstanding citizen of the world. My particular department, I deal in something called alternative sentencing, where I propose to courts around the country. I've traveled all over, and we submit a memo to the court prior, but I'll ask the judge to recognize that I've been working with specific individuals who have no priors, who are non-violent offenders, and our recidivism rate is close to 0%. But I'll ask the judge, therefore, to allow me to continue to work with this individual who I've worked with for many, many months. And I'll ask them to let me continue on this journey of rehabilitation for this individual, and not to interrupt that journey with a prison sentence that involves incarceration. I'd rather the person be under house arrest or in a halfway house, in a way where he or she is able to still interact with the community and give back to the community that they caused damage to, rather than just lock them away.
What is, do you know the Hebrew word for forgive?
Mechila or slicha.
And what does that mean? I know before we started this, we were talking about the importance of language, and when you understand these, there's a different understanding or an expansiveness to it. So what is that, when you, the best that you can translate that, the word forgiveness?
Well, a lot of the experiences that God allowed us to have here on earth is meant to give us an idea of how it works between us and Him and God. When we forgive someone, what we're saying is, I'm ready to, not let you off the hook. I'm sort of ready to allow this damage that you caused to be fixed now. I'm giving you permission to do so. And of course, you can now spend time to demonstrate to me that your apology is sincere, and I'm on the path of forgiveness with you. And a lot of Judaism revolves around this idea that when you mess up, it gives an opportunity for forgiveness from God. That He's not, God who's excited to punish people who break those 7 laws that I mentioned, or He's a God who wants very much that we should follow them. And when we don't, He simply wants us to acknowledge it verbally, acknowledge what we did wrong, and resolve to not do it again, and have remorse for the past, and be, and make a good resolution for the future to be more careful about those. So that's what it means to be forgiven, is to get cleansed,
and to how do I want to frame this question? So, how does the Judaic faith, from your understanding, again, you're only speaking for your own understanding, if someone does break one of the 10 laws, or one of the 7 laws, or commits murder, or rape, or child molestation, so like I was molested for 4 years of my life growing up, and it took me a very long time to forgive the man who did that to me. And the only reason that I did it is through different, not only counseling and therapy, but a ceremony that I had that showed me what the not forgiveness is doing to me personally. And so if someone does that in the from your understanding, how does that work? Is that kind of one of those things where it's like, look, you just got to kind of live out the rest of your time the best you can, and that's up to God? Or if you've met someone in your work that you do that has done something like that, how does, in the terms of in the Judaic faith, how does that, something like that work?
It's very loaded, especially since you mentioned that it's personal for you. It's a very loaded question, but I will say that there are times when forgiveness is not available, when you've murdered, or in some instances when you've done certain actions like the ones you've mentioned, where you murdered a part of somebody, and you can't get forgiveness from someone who's murdered, and you can't get forgiveness from a part of someone that's been murdered through molestation or rape, or so I'm not someone who understands the process of forgiveness in those particular very complex situations. I do believe very strongly in the context of incarceration that people need to be locked away until society can be absolutely 100% sure that it won't be repeated again. And those people should not just be rotting in jail, in prison, doing nothing. They should obviously be provided with teaching, with materials. They need to be taught more than all of us who haven't yet, who have never yet sinned to any great degree, and definitely have not committed the sins that you're referencing. So yeah, forgiveness is something that really it really exists on a more, not for anything as serious as the things you mentioned. I'll leave that for God to bring forgiveness to somebody who has proven that somehow the person they murdered, they need, there's two dimensions. There's getting forgiveness from God for damaging society, and forgiveness from the person. Yeah. And one of those two is gone. That opportunity is gone.
Yeah. So. And what in the Judaic faith, how does it work when someone dies? Like, what is the belief after someone dies? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Are you condemned to either being condemned would not be a bad thing to go to heaven? Because the reason I ask that is, there in Native belief there is no heaven or hell. You return to which you came from, creation. And that's, I think, one of the things that, from my own personal just experiences, understanding different conversations, it's like people walk a certain path because they're afraid to go to hell, versus I'm walking this path because it's in alignment with God, or in your God or creator. It's like, this is what makes me feel good. This is what gives my life meaning and purpose. And I'm not attached to an ending either or, but I choose to walk this path because I choose to walk this path. There is no, for me, I'm speaking about me, you're not taking me off the path. We call it the corn pollen path or the red road. I'm not getting off that for anything. And so in the Judaic faith, how does that work afterlife wise?
There's no geographic location.
Yeah. I love that.
There's no place that has a sign in the front that says heaven and another one that says hell. Unfortunately, I think it's become, every religion can just decide for themselves how they want to set it up so that people adhere to the rules of their religion. And if ultimately someone has a picture of hell with fire and that's what scares them, it's like we said before, there is a level where perhaps somebody needs that in order. And for some people, they need to be afraid of punishment in order to not do bad things. But, as we progress and grow spiritually, we have to believe that heaven and hell is a lot more complex and a lot more spiritual, because it's experienced as a soul. The body is 6 feet under. It's not going to heaven or hell. The soul is. And the soul cannot really be burned with fire, nor can it drown in water, nor can it bask in light and enjoy, in a physical sense, the light of the Garden of Eden. So what is it that is experienced? Well, you are when you're on earth and with a soul in a body, and let's say you chose to embarrass your colleague. You decided to say something, it wasn't nice, and you embarrassed that person. You're causing damage, and what you should be afraid of or scared of is not an eventual hell. You should realize that at the time that you're committing this sin and embarrassing someone in public, that itself is hell. It's hell. You're in hell because you're saying it. The victim is in hell because you're saying it in front of them, and everyone's in hell because they're hearing it. That's very hellish. It's a very hellish experience. It happens to be that your body, our physicality, can be so thick and so coarse and so unable to be sensitive enough to feel that hellish experience, that only after we live out our life here and our souls ascend and leave our bodies, then and only then do we suddenly experience that hellish experience without the quote-unquote benefit of a physical body saving you from that pain. Because you don't have the ego and the physical body dulling down the hellish pain that you really had been feeling when you did it. But when a person passes away, they sort of think of it as, this doesn't actually happen this way, but think of it as, you ever watched the video of yourself doing something stupid when you were younger, it's cringe. I mean, you're watching it and like, oh my gosh, I look so stupid, I sound so stupid. Well, after we pass on, watching that movie, watching that video of my whole life, there's going to be a lot of moments where I'm going to cringe and say, what was I thinking? And that's hell, because the soul is going to feel, the soul is in a raw state, and it's like think of it as fire. Fire can hurt me when it just touches my shirt. It definitely hurts when it touches my skin. It definitely hurts when it gets beyond my skin. Well, now the soul doesn't have a shirt or skin or anything protecting it anymore. It's the insides. It's your real true self, and it now, in the world of truth, which is where we go. We're not going to heaven or hell. We're going to the world of truth, and over there's going to be heavenly and hellish experiences. Now, it happens to be that hell is considered a place, a stopover place on the way to heaven, because we understand hell as being a place that when you experience the pain of hurting someone's feelings, let's say, as an example, once you've experienced that pain, you're done. It's time to go to heaven now, and just to live there eternally. And that's really what it's about. There's no such. God doesn't punish. That's why I do what I do in the Aleph Institute. God doesn't punish as an end in itself and say, oh, I am so ticked off at you for what you did down there. I am going to make you burn for eternity. He doesn't have that built into. He's not that. That's not the God that I know.
Yeah. And that's not even written in Scripture, from my understanding.
In general, none of the afterlife is written in our Scripture, because the Torah really just wants to focus on what you should be doing, not what's happening next. It's like now during my time on Earth, I'm by the plate with the bat, and I'm about to hit, and someone has to tell me how to hit the ball, and that's all that matters. Beyond that, everything else that goes on behind the scenes of this baseball game, whatever, it's not my business right now. So I don't have now. The Kabbalah delves deeply into the concept of, because Kabbalah is dealing with the why, what in fact is happening when you hit the ball, and when you do all the things that you're supposed to do according to the Torah's laws, what's actually happening in a much deeper way.
Man, the same thing. And I have a couple friends that are Buddhists, like devout Buddhists, and we've kind of talked about like karma and their understanding of that, and there is no hell for all time and eternity. It's a place that you visit, you kind of get scrubbed clean, and then you move on, right? And then you can be quote unquote reborn, and reincarnation and all of that. And for me personally, through not only my experiences, through ceremony, things that I've been through, the karma, the reincarnation is happening here and right now. It's like that you are my brother or my uncle, or you are my sister or my aunt, and it's happening right now. And when you realize that, it opens the door for more compassion, more understanding, more love, more listening. Not, oh, in the next lifetime when I come back as a human. It's like, even if you believe in that, I don't believe in that, but even if you do believe in that, you're not who you are anymore. You're not going to remember. I'm never going to be back in Joey how I am.
That's correct.
So you can't, it's a very, there's a lot of fallacies in that thinking. And so for me, when I work with that, it's more of, it's happening here right now. I want to focus on here now, cleaning up my karma right now, and not making people feel bad. And we kind of, I don't want to go into this path, but it was like in the Gospel of Thomas, it's like the kingdom of heaven is spread out here in the now. Like it's all around us right now. Don't worry about these other things. It's here. And then that's when you can tap into the magnificence and the beauty of every single person, the divinity within every single person. And if someone does do something heinous, like we talked about, look, you gotta, you start living your life this way, but then after that, it's between you and what's next. I'm not that facilitator for you. And again, I'm always speaking for me. When I have had these conversations with different Christians, it's not only condemnation for all time and eternity, but hey, as long as you claim JC is the man, then you'll be good. And I'm like, again, for me, when I have those conversations, here's the fallacy in that though. And that's, you're now not embodying or living in a certain way that puts you in alignment with Creator. So I can get on board with that. And so I really, really appreciate you sharing and opening up to that. There's a lot, again, of similarities in Native belief with that in terms of the here, the now, and putting you in the present.
Yeah, one of the things that I love to say now is, when we have these conversations about, karma or, heaven or hell, it's like, you either create your own personal heaven or you create your own personal hell. And that's the experience of your soul that you have right now in the physical. So if you want to live a heinous life, or you want to, not live in a good way up to the standards that, maybe God has written for us, or that, would basically are the rules or the laws that make you a good human, right? Of a decent person, is what Jordan B. Peterson would call it, which I love to listen to him. I know a lot of people have problems with him. But at the end of the day, I was telling Joey, I was like, he's a philosopher that studies many different aspects of religions, even though, he follows Christianity, but he's a philosopher and he thinks deeply on these things. And he says it too. It's like you create your own personal heaven or you create your own personal hell, depending on how you want to live. Do you want to be a decent human being, or do you want to be a not so great decent human being, and you live a heinous life, and then that's your own source of suffering, essentially. So
very well said. Yep. And you want to make sure you're creating heaven for other people here down on earth, and making sure you're not creating hellish experiences for other people here down on earth. The obsession should be about what I'm doing right now at this time right now, and what will happen afterwards will be great if I can make sure to pay attention mostly to what I'm doing right now. It's fascinating to learn about the afterlife, and as long as it's inspiring you about how to live life today.
I have so many fun questions to ask. I'll ask a fun one before I dive into the Kabbalah, because if you could have lunch with someone from the Old Testament, who would you sit down and have lunch with?
Might be Aaron, my great grandfather. I'm the son of his son of his son. In other words, it's father to son, direct lineage, because I'm a Kohen, known as what's called a priest in loose translation of the term. I think I'd like to meet him and just see where I come from. And
is there a question you would ask him?
Yeah, he's famous for learning how to, Moses was his brother. It's Moses' brother, and Moses was very like a real rabbi, he.
He's hardcore, dude. Moses is hardcore, dude.
He is, but that's because he had to represent adherence to follow the rules and not bend them. Aaron had the ability to be a man of the people and still be dedicated to his laws.
I'm way more like Aaron.
I think that's a quality I'd like to ask him about, and how he went about, sort of bridging the gap between those two. From biblical times, I would say probably Aaron.
Is there? I didn't know. I never knew that. Is there a book about Aaron? Stories about Aaron, or what's the main lesson that Aaron taught?
He loved peace. He loved making peace between husbands and wives that were not getting along with each other. He was very warm, very I like the idea of someone who was the brother of the king, the brother of the main man, and he made it his business to teach that pleasantly to everyone, and took from the highest of the high. Moses himself was taking from God, and Aaron was able to take the messages and spoon feed it to the people who needed it slower, to sort of bring it into their everyday life.
No, you're more like Aaron. That's not me at all. Is there a Hebrew name for Aaron? Is there a Hebrew name for Aaron?
Aaron.
Oh, okay.
Aaron. I think his real name is Aharon, with A-H rather than A-A. Maybe A-A is the more English, English version of it. But yeah, Aharon.
And Moses is the Hebrew name, or is there another?
Moshe.
Yeah,
Moshe.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's cool. Can you tell me? Because I'm one of the things that I do is I'm obsessed with names too, like etymology, and so I've read a lot about Joseph. Can you tell me in the Judaic faith who Joseph was? And for the people that don't know, Yosef, I believe, is the Hebrewic name. The story of Joseph, and I'm gonna ask, and I'm gonna tell you why I believe my name is Joseph, and what my Achilles heel in this life is.
My name is Joseph too.
Oh wow!
Yes, Yossi is from Joseph.
Oh, let's go! I got that Yossi upgrade right now. I love it.
And Yosef was most definitely. I mean, in terms of It's very similar to Aaron, actually. He takes his father's teachings, Jacob's teachings, and has to somehow continue to adhere to them and stay inspired while he's sold as a slave to the Egyptians and is serving as a slave, and then becomes the viceroy of Pharaoh. We're skipping a bunch of decades there, but he becomes,
the right hand man.
He's the right hand man for a few decades, and the very fact that he has this ability to maintain his truth, maintain his
integrity,
his integrity, constantly remembering who he is, and his clothes were the clothes of an Egyptian master, an Egyptian royalty, and he still had, he still stayed connected to his father. Even you're talking here 3 decades, he stayed connected to his father, and no one was able to bridge those 2 worlds as well as he did.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson, right? He does this really cool Bible series, and he breaks down the Bible from a psychological standpoint. Like, how could you make this a part of your life? And it was like the Joseph in the coat of many colors. And before I even listened to him, though, I knew that the Joseph word, it translates to he who interprets dreams, or he whose secrets revealed to. And as I've stepped more into my path, the corn pollen path, the red road, I used to keep a dream book when I was like in 2nd grade. I have a book that I used to, I'd have vivid dreams. And people were like, how do you have these dreams? That turned into like the visions I would have in ceremony work, in my meditations, on my vision quests and sweat lodges. And then like a lot of people, I study symbols a lot. Now, people do come, hey, I had this dream. What do you think that this means? And I always say, look, what do you think it means? That's the most important thing first. What do you think that it means? And then I'll listen and I say, here's maybe another perspective, but most importantly, it's what you think that the dream means. But I'll listen, and that's, people don't really know, that's how he kind of got out of jail, is that he was interpreting people's dreams. And then he had the Pharaoh came to him with the cows, I think, was it like dead cows, and he said a famine's coming. And then and so the reason I asked Joseph is when I look at him, not only was it about planning and organization, but even in the worst situation, try to find a solution, right? A solution finder. And man, it's like my hardest thing in my life is to forgive people. I've had a lot of betrayal. A lot of people have stabbed me in the back. I've lost a lot of friends. And I'm always having to forgive. And when I study the story of Joseph, it's like, and his brothers came and they were all hungry and he has all the grain, and he kind of like takes them through a series of, questions to see if they have changed. And then he's like, hey man, it's me. And they're like, oh my God, and they have all, whatever, the excuses, the stories, and he ends up forgiving them. And it's like always a reminder to me of, that's going to happen. And to have, if people have changed, forgiveness, absolutely, And I bring up the man who molested me earlier. He hasn't changed. He's an evil person, and I've talked about him a bunch because I hope one day justice is served. And it's like I do believe in forgiveness, but it's hard for me. It's really, really hard for me. It's hard for me to forgive what happened to our people. Because there's been no reciprocity. There's been no. When I talk about this and people, get over it, I said, man, have you ever been to a Native American reservation in 2024? There's people that don't even have running water. They have to heat their house with wood still. They go to the bathroom in outhouses. Do you understand that? They're living off of food stamps in the middle of nowhere. We've been reduced down to alcohol, drugs, and casinos. That's what people think about us. We were given the worst plots of land. And the land that some of these tribes are on, it was by accident. That the government didn't actually understand what kind of land they were giving them. And it's like, oops, we gave them a really nice piece of land. Well, our bad. But they try to give us the worst land everywhere. And for me, it's hard because I'm like, man, how can forgiveness be given if there has been no, there's been nothing that's changed? And so, for me, the way I was adopted off the reservation, I was adopted into a white family. I was adopted into a white Mormon family. And we won't go into all of that. But when I listen to that story, I say it's not Joseph in the coat of many colors for me. It's Joseph in the crown of many feathers. Mm. And I can have conversations with many different type of people. I'm studying different traditions in my own lineage, from the Mexican lineage to my Peruvian lineage. And a lot of times I find myself in rooms with people and they bring me in and they're teaching me things. And I look at that as like, oh, it's a sacred name. It wasn't until I was older that I took that name serious, where I'm like, whoa, it's like a pretty, serious name. And so I love the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. So I just wanted to, your teaching about it and your understanding of it, because I think for me, that if I had to sit down with someone from the Old Testament, it'd probably be maybe Abraham, just because he's the OG, but Joseph for sure. Like, what's up? Like, tell me about.
I love that choice. Wow.
Yeah. I guess I want to stick with this too, because in here I talked about the Jubilee and the Sabbath law. One of the things that when I read that was, again, from what you've experienced, it doesn't look like to me that's practiced at all, because of the nature of the world, especially in the U.S., is just take, more. And the only time we give something if it's a tax write-off or it's a donation. And when I read that, and even in the Old Testament where it talks about it, is that every 7 years people stop growing the food, or even while they're growing it, from my understanding, they're supposed to leave the outer edges for people who don't have enough, for the people who can come and get food and they don't have to pay because they don't have that. But every 7 years, hey, we're not tilling the soil, we're letting the earth recover, we're letting the earth breathe, and that's our sacrifice. Let it go for a year and it will come back. But every 15 years, hey, we're going to return what we bought or what we stole plus 1/3, and everything is forgiven. We're squashed and we kind of rebuild, and kind of things can change hands. Is that something that just got forgotten about? That it was like, well, we like these rules and laws and we'll just kind of tuck these ones away. And because for me, one of the things that, again, when I get into different conversations, is why aren't some of these things still practiced? Because it was never practiced for us and my people. And we got punished and genocided for just being us. And there has been no reciprocity. No, some of these conversations I've been a part of, and it's like, hey, we should return some of these lands that were stolen. Everything was stolen from us. Where the mines were, where it was taken, stolen from us. We were, on government papers, given alcohol, and we don't speak even the same language. So you know what they did? They put ink on our fingerprints, and there. Oh, he signed it. We get 10,000 acres. He put his thumbprint on it. That's what happened to us. And so then I'm like, well, why can't we get some of that back? I'm not saying we have to take it all back, because I understand the world has changed and there is room for negotiation. But when I don't see, and I'm not saying that you don't practice it, but when I look at these kinds of things, it's like, why are some of these things practiced but some of these things are not? How does that work in the Judaic faith, the Jubilee and the Sabbath law?
It still exists. In Israel, they still keep every 7th year, they have to leave the land. Sometimes they have Arab neighbors that can come in to do certain things, but in general, the Jews are prohibited from dealing with the land, because it's part of the spirit of the law, which we're supposed to tune into even outside of Israel, is the fact that it's not yours. It's yours, but it's not really yours. The land belongs to God, and God wants to remind us once every 7 years that doesn't really belong to you. There's little reminders all the time. You made reference to some of the commandments about leaving the corners of your fields and things of that nature. Within a 7-year cycle, the year number 3 and year number 6, you had to bring a large amount of. There was tithing where you had to bring a lot to the poor people. You had to give a lot to the poor people. The 7th year was like the ultimate of, this is not yours. Leave it alone. Let it restore itself. Because this is God's land. But we're supposed to be inspired by that idea of, it's not about us and conquering and colonizing, what we're supposed to be doing is giving and helping, looking around for those less fortunate groups, less fortunate individuals, and giving to them. That's why I have a field. That's why I have money. I'm a custodian of that field. I'm a custodian of that money, and I'm supposed to be distributing it to people. And whether it's money or love, or I'm supposed to be open to all people to teach them the ways of those 7 laws.
What about the Jubilee every 15?
50.
Oh,
so every 7 years times 7, so every 7 Shemitah years, sabbaticals, every 7 sabbaticals. The 50th year is even more powerful. All slaves that existed at that time would have to be freed again, because you don't own anything and anybody in reality. The slave wants to have made some money, and it was more of an employment back in the day. But even that, you can't have that person in your family forever. And the Jubilee year cut off that sense of me, I have, and it's mine.
Yeah, and I say that because I really am in alignment. I'm like, man, if the world just did that, the world would just, and that alone, be so much better than it is right now. Because there's a sense of humility, humbleness, where now you literally are putting yourself in a person's shoes. You're seeing where you have worldly attachments. Like, no, like, this is mine. And it really forces you to, like, look at yourself. And, like, actually, you know what? I have faith in Creator, God, that this is what's supposed to happen, and I'll be okay. I'll be taken care of. But if you don't even give yourself the opportunity to let that happen, then that's that false faith, that false humility, that false belief. And so, it's just like, these are kind of some of the things that I, really think about. And it's hard, as a native, when I study these things and find it out, it's like, man, none of this stuff was practiced. And back to, I don't have no beef with anyone in the Jewish faith, because those things weren't put upon us by anyone in the Jewish faith, And I really respect that. Whoever, decided, hey man, we're not going to America to slaughter and do these things to these native people. It's like, let them be. And so that means a lot to me, just in that, like, lineage, when you look at sticking on the lines of forgiveness, what had happened to the Jewish faith, not only in your lineage, but really, like, World War II, the Nazis and things. How does, in the Judaic faith, look at forgiveness in that sense?
As I mentioned, the 6 million offenses that took place, there's no forgiveness for that. They're not here to forgive. It's not. There's some things that we sort of have to defer to God to decide what He wants to do with that. But that's not something where, oops, I'm sorry.
Correct. Okay.
There's no forgiveness there.
And again, just your own personal understanding, like, because again, like with the natives, it's like, okay, I thought a lot about why would this happen, and da-da-da-da-da. When you look at that, and that happened to the Jewish people, is there like, this is a test, this is a punishment? How is that interpreted, if there is an interpretation of why that kind of stuff happened?
As you just implied, there's no interpretation.
Okay.
There's times when we throw up our hands and say, and I don't care if you're a rabbi or who you are, there's no room for interpretation of something that is so uninterpretable by human beings. I don't know if that's a real word. I just made it up. Uh-huh. It's something that's not designed to be interpreted. It's too heavy. It's too much. It's pretty clear. You can realize that this is not for you to interpret. And the time will come when God wants to explain Himself and excuse Himself and explain how it was for the good, or that I'm not going to go there, because I'm so far removed from that. That mindset, that possibility of being explained why 6 million Jews were killed, were murdered. You're talking about the epitome of evil. And when you talk about forgiveness, it's like, if you offend me, I want to forgive you because you're a good person who offended me. But this, you're 99.9% goodness, and I want to be with you in trying to redeem. You're very redeemable. Just a little part of you that was a little callous in your statement or whatever it may be, right? By way of example. But when you have something called pure evil, and its entire existence is only about murdering a group of people, what do you mean forgive you? Who am I forgiving? There's nothing to forgive. There's no one to talk to. It's the embodiment of pure evil. Mm-hmm. Only the embodiment of pure evil wants to snuff out a whole group of people. There's nothing mm-hmm. to redeem. Mm-hmm. There's no good side. There's mm-hmm. no.
Yeah, and that's, when I get into these conversations too with people, I said, because that goes into the whole. When people will say, "Oh yeah, but Native Americans killed other Native Americans," I said, "Yeah, but the difference was we didn't do it in the name of God. We didn't do it in the name of Creator. That wasn't why we did it. We're doing it because we were tribal. We are growing a community, but we didn't say God wants this, so we're going to kill this tribe and that tribe and that tribe." And if you can't understand that difference, then you and I will. First of all, this is me. You're an idiot. You're dumb because you can't think past one step. That was the difference, is that we weren't trying to push something. We're just growing our tribes from what we knew then. Whereas you're doing this because you say God wants this. And whenever I get in those back and forths, I'm like, it doesn't sound like God to me at all. I don't know a God that says go kill all these people and this is the only way and this is how it's got to be. It's like, so you're going to say you're going to do that to the entire world? That doesn't sound divine to me, versus letting an unfolding happen on its own, And, so that's really, again, it helps me about, like, with the heinousness stuff, that helps me a lot. So thank you for that. Do you have any questions about? I have more questions, but if you have some questions that you want to ask.
We have one on here that I wanted to ask.
Awesome.
I'm trying to find it. So I focus a lot on women's health and wellness, and also just in my own journey. It's like I have learned I have had to find my own path and my own way of embodying what my role as a woman is in the world. Now, this has taken a lot of work in ceremony, a lot of work around breaking down societal views on like how women are perceived now, their bodies, how they're sexualized, all different kinds of things, all different angles and perspectives. And I'm just curious because, very similarly how we were talking a little bit earlier, it's like women are revered in Native American and Mexican culture and tradition. There's a lot of different angles of respect and ways of being that women are revered, and through ceremony work and our ability to give life, our ability to be nurturing and caring. So what in the Judaic faith is the role of what is the role of women, or how do you guys kind of perceive that reverence in comparison, I guess, to the man's role?
The reverence and the respect is built in. It's not something that's like superimposed on the religion. By the way, it would be nice if we can treat our women nicely so that they can be better wives and better daughters. And it's built in from the beginning of time, meaning from the time that God made Eve and had to train Adam how to have a healthy relationship with her. I don't know if we have time to discuss how that went down. Didn't go so well.
I have all these memes with my friends, and I always send them these memes about Eve, and it's like she's juggling these apples, and it's like God says don't eat it, and she's like, it's just like a funny little.
So, let's talk about the Jewish man is at home, and he is himself, and then he goes out to fulfill his mission, to do what he was put on this world to do, and to this person you act in a particular way, to this person you act in a different way, all because you're connecting to different people, and therefore you're not the way you are in your house. You're in different spaces, and you're in different modes. And you define yourself almost, you're constantly redefining yourself in those different modes and wearing those different hats and interacting with different people, and it's a very complex mission that you have. The woman in the house initially, and I'll go on to say that she does the same exact thing as well. Both men and women do both of these roles, but if we're talking about masculinity, femininity, which my wife embodies femininity in a deep way, she's the CEO of the house, meaning of our identity.
The matriarch.
The matriarch. She determines the Jewish status of a child is only determined by the mother, not by the father. The functionality of the Jew, I'm a priest, a Kohen, I mentioned earlier, is because of my father. So how I will experience that Judaism, express it, act on it, is dependent on the masculine side of my birth. But the feminine side is my identity. It's who I am.
God,
and
beautiful.
A woman is basically the one who defines the house, the place where we are, where we're it. She's much more in sync with God automatically, intuitively, without having to do anything. She's not the rabbi. I'm the rabbi because I need to struggle to figure out how I'm going to do God's mission. She doesn't have to struggle like me. She doesn't have a yarmulke. We talked about the yarmulke before. She doesn't wear a yarmulke. She doesn't need to be reminded with some symbolism. It's embedded in her.
It's in her womb.
It's who she is. So she's more the godlike creature of the. If you want to talk about, who embodies God and who tries to bring God out to the rest of the world, you would say the woman is this, we call her the akeret habayit in Hebrew, the mainstay of the home. She basically sets the tone for what it means to be godly and godlike, and then we take that, and if we have a healthy home, we can bring that out. Now she does the same thing, and she interacts with the women and does outreach to the women, and she does a lot of things that are very much revolving around women's functionality within Judaism, the mitzvah of mikvah. Right? My wife is a mikvah lady, which means that, even now as we speak, she's there helping a woman go through a process of the ritual bath, which is all a completely spiritual process. It involves physical water and a physical bathhouse, physical spa, but it's a spiritual experience, and only she can handle that, and only the woman she's with, and it's very private and intimate. Only they can handle this process. It's not something that the greatest rabbi in the world can't even fathom, can't even come close to that part of the process. It's a very deep one. It's very intimate. It's very real. And,
man, that's beautiful, because in many native traditions, not all of them, but they're the matriarchal society. Like you were saying, the woman is the CEO of the household. And when you introduce yourself, we have what's called the clan system. And there's hundreds of different clans. And when you introduce yourself, you introduce who your grandparents were and who your clan was. And through that, you could be uncles and aunts and grandpas and brothers and sisters and nephews. And it's because of that natural intuition that in native and indigenous, it's the womb space, where the place where life is created. That's what gives them, that's like their yarmulke, right? It's like it's already in them, it's embedded in them. And, but they have, like I said, it's called a kindala. I'm totally butchering the word, but it means like changing woman. So the women facilitate these things. There are certain ceremonies that only women can do. When we do our teepee ceremonies in the morning time, the most sacred part of the night is when the water is brought into the teepee, and only a woman can do that. Because that is how sacred water is, and that is how sacred a woman is. So that is the woman's job to bring in the water and to bring in the food, because it's that sacred, and they're born with that. So I love that. I didn't know that. And then it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And it my brain's like, because there's so many correlations in even in birth work that is too. It's like in birth work, it's like the women are the ones that are the midwives, that are the parteras in Mexican tradition, that are helping to bring life forward, and they're the only ones that really participate in that. Now in today's society, I've heard that there's maybe men that go into that space, and that can be controversial for a lot of people. But I'm in the belief that it's like women do women's work in that way because it is sacred. But that's a awesome answer because, you know, for me, as I've been on my own path, it's like I've been in this process of, well, what is my role as a woman in this society? Like, who am I as a woman? What does that even mean? What am I embodying? You know, what in my intuition and strengths am I embodying? And how can I be a better role model, right, for other women to also follow in those footsteps? So that's really, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Anything more godly than bringing life into the world physically and spiritual, in a spiritual sense? If a woman doesn't have biological kids, is there anything more godly than adopting a spiritual child, meaning giving nurturing guidance in a pleasant way, in a soft way? Is there anything more godly than that? I mean, that's literally how God nurtures the world. A woman nurtures her household or other people that she takes on to nurture. There's nothing, they're already like completely in sync and compatible with God. And it's a very, very powerful thing. And
There was I had just listened to, again, a podcast by Jordan B. Peterson. And I listened to that a couple weeks ago. And then I just started this book called Braiding Sweetgrass, which is it's a Native American book on this plant medicine, this herb that's called sweetgrass. And it's a very sacred medicine. And there's a creation story to it of how it came. And it came in the form of this woman, sky woman. And, you know, they say she fell from the sky and she fell onto the land or into the water. And then the animals took her up and she got put onto a turtle's back. And then she started dancing and she made, and she took mud from underneath the water and then she made the land and that became Turtle Island, what's today. But they, in the book, they had correlated her to Eve, and they had mentioned how in Native American tradition, this woman had been revered for her sacredness and her contribution of sharing the land, nurturing the land, caring for it, caring for the animals, caring for the earth, in comparison to Eve, where they said, well, that was where our big clash happened, where we had this reverence for a woman and the sacredness that she brought life forth. And then there was Eve, where she also brought life forth, but she was condemned, or more so condemned in the biblical stories for her sins. And that was the big, you know, clash between the belief systems of, you know, North America and the Native American traditions, and then Catholicism and Christianity coming together. So I thought that was a really interesting thing as well.
And in that book, there's it's funny now that she mentioned that, in the book there's a chapter called Meshkos Keno Magwin, and it's like the 7 laws of sweetgrass, and they're very similar to how you treat people, don't take more than you're going to use, giving back to the land, reciprocity. It's like the laws of sweetgrass. This is, and it's the author, I forget her name of the book. Do you remember her name?
I don't.
But she has a beautiful talk about Meshko Keno Magwin and what it means. And it just, when she said that, I'm like, oh, that's like the 7, I keep saying it wrong, the Eid laws of Noah?
Noahide laws.
Noahide laws.
7 laws of Noah.
Yeah, 7 laws of Noah, you know. It's just a lot of correlation in that. Okay, 2 questions. I only got 2 more questions. So she did her DNA. She has how much % Jewish blood?
It's like 1.5.
And then that girl, Caitlin.
You're too Jewish.
Yeah. It was when we found out, we were psycho. We're like, you got the sacred bloodline. We're like, shalom, shalom. We're gonna start celebrating.
Well, one of my family members, on my mother's side, I guess, did a lot of. She did a lot of research into our bloodline, but she said that our bloodline comes from Abraham.
Really?
So.
And then that girl, Caitlin, that came in, I believe she said she's like 30% Jewish. So when someone finds that they have Jewish bloodline, does that mean that they're Jewish? Does that mean they can go to synagogue? Does that mean they can study certain things? Like, how does that work?
Well, first of all, if someone's not Jewish and they decided that they want to convert to Judaism, the door is open. But Jews are never seeking converts. and they never try to hook people.
So I love it
because it's somewhat offensive to tell someone that unless you follow a particular path, you're going to heaven, and if you don't, you're not gonna get that reward. No, as I mentioned, if there's a code for all human beings, it's if you keep those if you're 7 out of 7 with those 7 laws, then you're going to be blessed, and you're going to go to, and you don't have to be part of any particular religion. You need to be religiously adhering to those 7 laws, and that's it. If someone finds in their bloodline that there's Jews, they just have to really ask one question: find out if their mother is Jewish and if their mother's Jewish. As I mentioned before, women have that power to really give over that identity. It's the core of who you are. It's not about your bloodline. It's not about how many genes or DNA stripes. It's got nothing to do with it. Judaism is not something that is genetic or it's a spiritual experience. It's a spiritual identity, and we're not. It's people get into all these arguments and discussions, about whether it's a race or ethnicity, and it gets very people have never really figured out, because we have there are black Jews, there are Jews from every part of the continent, and
even the Semitic, there's like 13 different variations.
There's tribes, right? There's different
the
splits, and then people converted many years ago. So now you have a bunch of people from a certain group that are Jewish now, fully Jewish. But it all boils down to whether your mother's Jewish, and you're from a Jewish law standpoint, you're either 100% Jewish, regardless of what you keep and what you observe and what you believe in, or you're 0% Jewish, in the sense that you don't have to be. You're not. If your mother's not Jewish, you're not Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish. You just have to be who you are and embrace it.
Shalom, shalom. What does that mean?
Shalom, as in shleimut, you mentioned before, or you mean shalom? The word shalom.
Yeah. Like when they say, they're cheersing, all that,
So it has one. It's one word. The Jews try to save the space in their literature by just having one Hebrew word that can mean a bunch of different things in English. Shalom can mean hi, it can mean bye. Shalom means peace. Shalom comes from the word that you had mentioned previously to me, shleimut, which means trying to, that's perfection or completeness, I should say. You have shleimut, you have completeness. But yeah, the word shalom typically is mostly, in language, it's mostly used as saying shalom, hello, or, but shalom means peace. When you're saying
shalom,
when we say hello, we're saying peace unto you. Shalom aleichem.
Shalom aleichem.
Yeah, shalom, peace upon you.
Peace upon
but the word really means peace. It's used as hi and bye, but it really means peace.
Beautiful. Yeah. So the shalom, what does that say before when they say that? Or am I just hearing things wrong? When they toasting, we've heard where they say shalom, shalom.
They're not, when they toast, typically, at least the Hasidic Jews or more contemporary Jews would say l'chaim.
L'chaim.
L'chaim means to life.
L'chaim.
So
l'chaim shalom, so you could say that?
Oh, so some people say in response to l'chaim, they'll say l'chaim tovim or l'shalom. So one guy says l'chaim to life, another person responds to good life and peace, and to peace. Or some people in my circles will say l'chaim b'livracha, to life and to blessings.
Wow. Mazal. What does mazal mean?
That's a really cool word. Most people, again, use it in the everyday language as mazal tov, good mazal, which means, people think it means good luck. Some people use it as congratulations. So you'll say mazel tov, mazel tov. You ever heard that term, mazel tov?
Yeah.
So but mazal really means a drip. So it means that from above there's something that's dripping to us. It's blessings. And you say it should be a good mazel, means it should be a good healthy drip. There shouldn't be a pause in it. There shouldn't be. It should keep coming down. It should be a good flow from above to below. That's what mazal really means. So mazal tov is not just congratulations. It's more, you have there's the celebration going on. I hope that I'm blessing you that there should be a constant flow from above into the marriage or into the bar mitzvah boy, bat mitzvah girl, whatever it may be.
I've been watching this is all I own. I don't own anything, but I found myself looking at all these different guys in New York City on Diamond District, and this one guy's name is Moses. He's Jewish, sometimes he wears a yarmulke at his jewelry store or whatever. Young guy, flashy, but when they do watch deals and they're back and forth, And when they're like dead serious, and it's like 1800 Mazal, 18 Mazal, and they go back and forth like, okay, Mazal, and then they hug and they kiss, and we set that back up, and so I'm like, oh, it's a cool word. You know, like, so I'm glad.
They're speaking about it like more like a good luck charm kind of thing. And Chai is 18. The word for life. Each letter has a numerical value equals 18. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to sell and really just want to make more money. They want to throw in another $18,000 into their price. So they say, "Oh, Chai," you know.
Okay, so now the Kabbalah. This is like the juice, because this will go into like the psychedelics. That stuff is, how does that work if someone wants to study that in terms of in the Judaic faith? It's a process. From my understanding, you have to be at a certain age. It's almost kind of like a rite of passage. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but it's not just you just jump into it, which we had talked on the phone. That's kind of why I wanted to start to talk to a rabbi, because I kept getting, in my ceremonies and visions, I kept seeing the tree of life. I kept getting things, and I'm like, am I supposed to start studying this? And just like I studied the Tao, I had a teacher to teach me the Tao for like 5 years. And I still study it to this day. But I was like, I don't know, man. I can't just jump into something like this without something. So I decided to not do it. And I kind of just was like, look, maybe later on in my life, but again, I don't want to be disrespectful. There's certain sacred texts that I won't ever read just because it's not for me. I understand that it's not for me. Nothing against it. It's just that's not for me. So how does the Kabbalah work? From your understanding, your teachings, is this something that you are going to study? And, I understand that it's, and this is probably poorly worded, it's the mystical side or the mystic side of the Judaic faith.
Mystical teachings that drive, the restrictions, the age restriction, as well as the restriction that you only study Kabbalah after you first studied everything else, is only when you're studying Kabbalah straight from the book, the original book, the Zohar. We have so many books today that have extracted from the Kabbalah teachings that are very applicable, very, very, very much able to be internalized by you in order to enhance your life and your adherence to the 7 laws of Noah. And in as much as portions of the Kabbalah help you in doing so, you need to learn it, study it, no matter what age you are, no matter how much you know or don't know from the other books. And that's a fact. And there's so many resources for it. I don't know if you want to post any, but I can tell you right now, like Chabad.org, Chabad.org has so much Kabbalah that is all practical Kabbalah. It has teachings that have nothing to do with making you sit and learn the Zohar from the original text. It's all applicable and makes life. You need to be inspired in today's. Look what's going on out there in the world. I don't have to tell you. It's craziness out there. It's chaos. Mm-hmm. And the Kabbalah can really center you and help you really get involved in fixing this world and making the world a better place. It's the why. Why are we here? Why was I born? What's my purpose? What's my mission? Mm-hmm. Okay, I know that there's 7 laws, but what am I accomplishing when I keep them? Every time I respect life. What's happening? What kind of fireworks are being? I need more. I need more. I'm in 2024. You can't just tell me to do 7 laws and then leave me be. I need you to keep me going. I need to be able to not be deterred by the fact that these laws are not being adhered to by other people around me. Like how do I inspire them? How do I, how do I make myself better? How do I make the world better? The Kabbalah teachings. It's not Kabbalah. It's think of it as someone sat there and extracted from the Kabbalah what you needed. It's the spoon feeding of wisdom that I mentioned before.
Yeah, I would love to get some more resources for that, and that might have been what it. Because anything that I do in ceremony, I'm getting ready to go to Colombia to go to my next dieta, is what they call them, and live in isolation for 6 weeks and study under a woman out there, a Colombian medicine woman, a shaman. And a lot of the, I share, I'm very open, some things I share, but a lot of things, a lot of things I don't share. But what I do share, it's always practical. Yeah, I had this vision or I had this message, but how do I live it in today? How do I bring it into life? That's all that matters to me. None of the other stuff, it's great, it's fantastic, but if I can't make it tangible, then it doesn't do me any good. And so I've really tried hard to, whenever I get a message or I go into prayer or I go into lodge, what can I actually do to bring that into my everyday life? Even when I read the Tao or these things, it's like, okay, what does this mean in terms of how could I act or how could I listen? How could I say that better? How could I understand that better? Because if I can't do that, then then I'm not in integrity, because it's all just, again, people who talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And I think that's another reason why I respect the Judaic faith. When people actually practice, there's fasting, we don't do this, we don't do this, there's these different things. And if you adhere to these things, it's not about punishment, it's not about being more spiritual, it's about, these are the sacrifices I'm willing to make to create a relationship with Creator or God. That's what I'm willing to do to create that. And that needs time, space, stillness, silence, family, connection, deep reflection or contemplation. And that's a lot of Native American tradition, ceremony, practices. It's, you don't just sit and read. It's not about how much you know. It's, hey man, you could sing all the songs and know all these things, but when it's hour 13 of a 17-hour ceremony, are you upright? Are you falling asleep? Are you paying attention? You're not. So you're not in tune. So put that down and just start to practice. We talked about this on the phone. You got to get your body in a good way. Because if I'm going to sit like this for 17 hours, I got to make sure that my body is there, that I'm not in pain, or I'm kneeling, or I'm dealing with all kinds of, different things. And when I go into my fasts, it's like, yeah, because it puts me in tune with Creator. And that's, through our mutual friend, he had kind of shared with me some of the different holidays and things. I was like, man, I didn't know that, man. That's really, hey, we got something like that too. Like, this is how we do it though. And it's always hard. It's always a physical, mental, emotional hardness, because, hey, you got to let go of the physical. We're getting into the spiritual connection. And the more that you hold to this physical, you're not going to get there. So as soon as you understand that, it's like, oh yeah, this is going to hurt, or this is going to be painful, this is going to be scary or confusing or confronting, but like it's going to, it pays off in the end, but it doesn't pay off in the flesh. And so, yeah, man, I would be interested in, the practical side of the Kabbalah, the holidays. Can you explain Hanukkah, what Hanukkah is? Because I just know pop culture. Like, what is that? What is Hanukkah? How does that work, and what does it mean?
Well, its message is universal, bringing light to the world. And there was a lot of darkness at that time. There was Hellenism. There was the Greeks were oppressing the Jews, and it was very hard for them to stick to their, to their faith when everyone around them was having a good time and trying to convince them to just, serve the body, don't serve the soul. But eventually they did overcome the Greeks, and they got back their holy temple, and they lit the menorah, they lit the candelabra in the temple. Seven branches.
Seven. It's seven, okay.
Yeah. Ours have 8 because we don't want to duplicate from the holy temple. But yeah, the one in the temple had 7, and a miracle took place where God basically said, "Hey, I'm with you. I've been with you this whole time. You haven't seen me because you were feeling oppressed. When you feel oppressed, you don't feel God's presence. But I'm here, and I'm going to make a miracle with the oil. That the oil that was supposed to last for 1 day will last for 8 days until you have enough time to go get more oil. And I just want you to know that sometimes I hide myself, but it's because I want you to come find me in my hiding place. And you did, and I'm here." So Hanukkah is a very, very powerful message. The world can be very dark and feel very dark sometimes. Individuals feel that way. Groups of people feel that. Sometimes the whole world can feel that way. And God says, "Hey, peekaboo, I've been here the whole time, and all you have to do is do your part. Light the menorah with the little amount of oil you have, and I will take care of the rest. You guys don't have to perfect this world. I'll bring perfection to the world with the coming of the Messiah, and the world is going to be redeemed, and you're going to live then you'll have perfection. Just head in that direction, and I'll take over at some point and finish the job for you.
And so it's a 7-day period?
It's an 8-day period.
8-day period?
Yeah.
What is it, like, when does it start? When does it end?
It's according to the Jewish calendar, which follows 12 lunar cycles. So the Jewish calendar follows the moon, and the moon is 29 and a half. It takes a 29 and a half day cycle. It's a journey, and we each month is either 29 or kind of a half a day. So you have 29 or 30 days. It varies, it alternates basically, and yeah, it happens to be that we have a system where because the 12 lunar months is shorter than a full solar calendar year, so we have to add a month every once in a while, about every 3 years, and we end up that Hanukkah is in fact always around December time. It moves because it has to move because we're losing 11 days a year. But the 12 lunar cycles is 11 days shorter than a solar year. But we'll add a month every 3 years, and then it sort of evens out.
Awesome.
So,
if there was a book that you'd recommend for someone that is not of Judean faith or Jewish, if I said, hey, if I wanted to read a book that is really good to read in terms of whether they're lessons, understandings, other than the Bible, or right? I was like, no! What would you recommend?
I would recommend the book written by Rabbi Simon Jacobson, Toward a Meaningful Life. That's what it's called, Toward a Meaningful Life. And it's because it's not, those are universal messages that came from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who I grew up with in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. And those teachings are for everyone for all times. So that would be a good place to start, and then from there.
Yeah. And then think about this, pray about it. If there's, now that you've talked to us, right, you kind of see what we're about. If there's a book that you'd recommend for me to read,
sure,
other than the Old Testament or, a forbidden text, that I don't want to be disrespectful, then be like, oh, you know what, this guy, like, this would be good for him. So think about that. I would appreciate. I talked to Dan, our mutual friend, about a book that was recommended to me. I didn't get it, but the guy who recommended it to me, because he knew I was on this path to find a rabbi in 2020, he said, you should read this book called God is a Verb. And he said that was a good one. I never got it, but I'm open to, hey man, I think this might be a good one for you to read. So
interesting.
Yeah, I love reading. So, but I'm very, I used to be just a voracious reader and just read all books, but then it causes confusion. And then what is it? And so and I've had a lot of time to just kind of get to know my own thoughts, my own self, my own prayer, my own ways, my own songs. Obviously, I'm still learning, and I go do my thing, but I'm always open to learning or listening, and especially if it's in a book, I really just like having that, to say, man. And then when I find someone, hey, you should check this out. It's a really good read, So, I don't have any more questions. Do you have any more questions?
I don't have any more questions. You give us so many answers.
Yeah, maybe later we could do a part 2 because there were some things we didn't get to, but. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your time and just being with us. Like, I learned a ton, and I'm really happy that we got a chance to have this conversation. So thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty and the work that you do and the willingness to share with us like this in a good, healthy way. Like I said, I learned a lot. It was very meaningful to me because
so did I.
My intuition had always said that there's more common of the people in the Judaic faith, the Native American tradition, than there are differences. And I learned a lot about that tonight, and I'm really glad that I listened to that intuition. And I'm really glad that Serene stayed, I do feel really inspired right now, I'm about to close OPT on Saturdays and open up on Sundays, It's like that to me is like, oh yeah, like I can easily do something like that. If that's how the OGs did it, then I try to be like the OGs. So
the OGs wanted each person to have their specific path, and they didn't. They had different children. Abraham had, a child, Ishmael, and he had a child, Isaac, and he had children that he sent to the east, to the far east. And guess what? We have very different missions and messages for the world, and they're all children of Abraham. So there's no need to do exactly what Dad did. It's to do what Dad asked us to do for the world. That's really important.
I like that a lot. So, yeah. Thank you.
It was a real honor and privilege to be with you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. If you guys have any questions for me, let me know. And I'll see you guys, or you'll hear me next time. Shalom.
Shalom.